Hey, welcome to the pre-show. This is where we sit and talk a little bit about the news of the day before we get into the bulk of the program. So if you're tuning in online, welcome. We'll be going live on air in just a sec. So on Thursday, we had a conversation with a gentleman from Mexico City, Saul, and basically he was telling us about this protest that had started out actually on Cinco de Mayo, and they were starting in different parts of Mexico and coming to culminate in Mexico City on the 8th, which was yesterday,
right?
All around this No Más Sangre movement, no more blood movement, to end the violence of the drug war in Mexico. So it turns out that it seems like, you know, we're looking at this AP report. It looks like they had 20,000 people actually show up in the middle of a square in Mexico City wearing white t-shirts saying "Enough bloodshed" and carrying photos of a slain victim, the son of a poet who really helped to coordinate all this. So I'm wondering, what do you guys think? I mean, does this make a difference? Is 20,000 people enough to sway the Mexican government?
Well, I think whatever people do when they get in the street, if it's for a revolution for democracy or for an issue that's specific to their community, is great because it sends a message to other people that you have to get involved. One person can make a difference. Will it make a difference ultimately in Mexico? You can only hope. I mean, they've been through so much, thousands of people killed over the years. Thousands of people have lost children, wives, spouses. So you hope it makes some difference.
Well, 20,000 people is a lot of people, but if you compare it to the amount of people that died, at the end of the article, it's 34,000 people.
Yeah, well, they're estimating that like 40,000 people have died since the war started in 2006. Exactly, and I think that's part of the challenge. I mean, like, it's a lot of folks, but, you know, this war has been going on for 5 years. There are a lot of people that are really invested in the war, you know, for whatever reasons. Not to say that they're supporting the violence or what have you, but obviously they're invested in that policy. I don't know if this is going to be enough to sway them.
Well, the other thing to keep in mind is that you're risking your life probably when you're going out to protest against drug dealers in Mexico. I mean, they've killed civilians without any regard whatsoever.
Well, that's the interesting thing. I mean, these guys are protesting not the drug dealers, they're protesting the government.
But still, ultimately, they're protesting the government's actions with regard to the drug dealers. The fact that letting the drug dealers now essentially have a government within a government. They're running a country down there. So, you know, I mean, the government, what I've read, has tried to do what they can, yet there's a lot of corruption that runs from the top to the bottom, not to the president, but from all of the police force all the way down, chiefs of police being shot by other police officers.
Yeah, and that's the sad thing. Like, as we were researching the story, you know, one of the things that came up is this idea of a political vacuum in Mexico that has happened because of, you know, things that have gone on with the agricultural economy there, the switch from one party that was in power for 70 years until Vicente Fox and crew. Actually, I think it might have been a little bit before Fox, but basically Calderon's party now came in about 10 years ago. And, you know, now all of a sudden the drug dealers who seem to have some kind of maybe, let's not say an allegiance, but let's say that there was some basic understanding between the powers that be and the narco traffickers, you know, now they're in all-out war. And so it's almost like more politicians have been overtly corrupted than ever before.
It's just a sense of pity I have. I mean, I read the book about Lebanese Civil War, Pity of the Nation by Robert Fisk, and it reminds me of the same kind of situation where it's beyond the average person's control. There's no doubt the average person wants to end drug dealing and the slaying of civilians, but who can rise up and do this? It's almost, at some point, perhaps the United States or international contingent of troops going, like a UN type of thing.
Well, I want to come back to that U.S. point in a second, but let's first check Skype. We've got our guest. Can you hear us?
Yep.
Okay, excelente. We're going to be coming to you in just a second, Hossam. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll be right at you right after we start at the top of the show.
Sure.
Derek, we should probably mention about the Facebook thing.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So we posted a question on our Facebook page.
Right here.
You want to read it out?
Yeah. Today on the stream, we are obviously talking about Egypt. So we asked you, do you think that Egypt's post-revolutionary politics are on the right track? We've got hundreds of comments, and hopefully we'll be getting to some of them and discussing them during the show.
You know, quickly to that point, see, this is part of what I think that Mexico's done wrong, is that the U.S. has been really involved. The U.S. has been a big supporter of the so-called war on drugs, but it's not working because we've never addressed the core issue, which is that massive American demand is fueling the production and the trafficking of these drugs through Mexico. So until you deal with the demand issue, like, why would they stop selling them?
I guess just say no wasn't enough, huh?
Apparently not.
You got to do a lot more.
You know what Hussam was saying, the guy who's going to be our guest, he was talking about how You know, the fact that the U.S. wasn't necessarily involved in the revolution in Egypt played an integral part in it actually lasting and being successful. So maybe that's actually what's happening in Mexico. People are just trying to take matters into their own hands, but as you said, the U.S. is so entrenched.
Well, and it's like the U.S. is busy, like, okay, we're saying we're going to help the Mexican military, the Colombian military, fine. We're going to, arrest cats for smoking weed in the United States, fine. We're not going to do anything to deal with why people are seem to have this voracious appetite for drugs, nor to interdict the massive flow of weapons from the United States into Mexico. I feel like those would be things that we could tangibly do that might make a difference.
It's going to take some impetus here among Americans to push elected officials to do something like that.
Yeah.
And the focus in the States is clearly on economy, jobs, deficit reduction. No one's talking about issues. No American politician always talking about Mexico and its impact of drugs flowing into America.
Yeah.
Us having any sort of obligation, having obligation to another country. No, we don't talk about that. There's no obligation to many other parts of the world. Perhaps it will be, if our economy got better, we'd have more of a sense of international obligation to helping others.
I mean, I don't know. I think it's a really thorny issue, and I think that ultimately what's going to wind up happening is you're going to have more serious conversations around decriminalization and potentially legalization of at least marijuana, if not some other items. I remember the Bush administration once had these commercials where it's like, well, when you smoke weed, you supporting terrorists, and it didn't do anything. Nobody.
Right.
And it's almost like at this point, like, I don't know if you can tell people enough, like, hey, there are consequences to if you do X, Y, Z, P, or Q. It's almost like you got to legitimize it, regulate it, tax it, and tax it for the economic cost, but also the potential human cost, and then see if the market factors react to that.
No one thought we'd ever wean ourselves from cigarette smoking. That's gone down a great deal.
Yeah,
so there is a chance.
Exactly.
There's a huge campaign.
Taxing it.
Taxing it's one. Well, it's not legal, so we can't tax it. But the campaign of showing images, showing people the connection between smoking and cancer was indisputable. You're going to die from smoking.
Absolutely. And it was able to be done over a long period of time because it was a legitimate industry. See, when it's a quote-unquote underground or what they say black market industry, you can't really make a lot of, valid campaign against it because everything looks corny. But when you're starting to see it and people are able to discuss it openly, I mean, literally, I don't know anybody who smokes anymore. Well, that's true. I know two people, but hardly anyone. At least in the U.S., I go to Europe.
President Obama smokes.
Everyone is blazing,
Well, we go to the Middle East. Go to the world.
Everybody's smoking.
I even enjoy it.
Yeah. So, all right, that's it for the pre-show. Stand by for our real show. We're going live in about 10 seconds, so we will see you on air in just a sec.
Bang.
Hi, I'm Derek Ashong, and you are now in the stream, a social media community with its own daily TV show. We are bringing you, as always, the stories that are ongoing, global, and sourced from social media. Today, in the midst of revolution, who do you trust? Online activists strike back at the secret police. And Egyptians' use of the internet is spiking ahead of national elections. But are the messages getting any clearer? Joining us today on the couch, as always, our digital producer, Ahmed Shihab El-Din. Also in with us today is Dean Obeidallah, a Palestinian-American comedian and regular contributor to the Huffington Post. Dean, great to have you here.
Thanks for having me on again.
What's your take on the coverage thus far of the Osama bin Laden death and how it's been kind of impacting coverage of the Arab Awakening?
Well, I think, unfortunately, in a way, it has pushed the Arab Awakening coverage out. I mean, the focus has become Osama bin Laden. But clearly our news cycle in America and the world is very, very fast. The bin Laden story is going to fade. We'll get back to the Arab revolutions, focusing on those issues, Syria, Libya, Bahrain, what's going on.
I totally agree with you. I think that the bin Laden thing, it's big news, but he's gone. And there's stuff that's really, really happening that I think we need to be paying attention to.
I agree.
Ahmed, what kind of stuff are people talking about online?
Yeah, Derek, today we're going to start with 4 videos that came in from a gentleman on our feed, the stream, Don James Duncan, who's in Tunisia. And as you can see right here, this first one is of protests. This is in Tunisia, again, just to clarify, the country that started the Arab Spring Revolution seems to be seeing counter-revolutions. And it all started on Facebook with the rumor of a coup. The first video shows you footage from protests on May 8th. So this started, and then there's more video down here of police finally starting to allegedly fire tear gas at protesters. So the clashes began on Sunday afternoon, and that's why they imposed a curfew. Now, further down, this is a video of a journalist, a Tunisian journalist, being beaten. And there's been several instances of this, and of course, Al Jazeera is covering this on their website. And finally, the fourth video is a group of people in a cafe, let me just rewind here, who are watching this nationally televised speech where, this prime minister is responding to the controversial Facebook clip. Now, we want to hope to get to this story later on in the week. But in the meantime, Dean, amongst other people, also submitted stuff about Bahrain. People don't want us to neglect what's going on in Bahrain.
Yes.
So maybe, Dean, you can just very briefly tell us what you sent us.
Well, I sent an article about how the government in Bahrain is using Facebook and Twitter to try to get people to show their loyalty.
Right.
And it struck me as interesting because in the past it's been the pro-democracy people using social media to unseat a regime. In this case, the regime is saying, let's show your loyalty. And I was joking, on Facebook, maybe you show your loyalty to Bahrain, but you like the page, and if you post
like
them,
Bahrain.
you're not loyal.
Yeah.
But it's interesting that the government is using this now.
Yeah, the last thing we want to show is this is a website that says Kullina Hamad, and basically, as Dean said, a lot of people have been tweeting us that there are these movements, but they've also, we found a tweet that says shocking video, allegedly live rounds being shot in the University of Bahrain. So let's just watch this through. Now, this video would suggest, as you can see, there are bullets there that, there's still something going on in Bahrain, whatever it is.
And we unfortunately we can't verify what's happening in that video, but it seems that something's happening. Talk to us real quick about the Facebook page. You said, what was that, the title that it said?
Sorry, let me just go back to this. Kullina Hamad, which basically means we are all Hamad. It's just showing solidarity with the leader
For
of
the
Bahrain.
leader, and it has about 2,400 likes.
Right, there are several different pages, so we're not sure which one this is of them. But I just want to quickly go, speaking of the government in Bahrain, this is the foreign minister, Khalid al-Khalifa, and he, is saying that life is getting back to normal in Bahrain. So, that in contrast with the video, we'll leave it to the viewers. But let's hope that we can cover this story in the future.
Absolutely.
And also, we have some tech news from Al Jazeera. We've just launched applications for BlackBerry and for the Android, so you can stay connected to the news anywhere and even upload your own videos, photos, any media you have, and share it with us at Al Jazeera. And remember, you could share stories with the entire Stream community. Just tweet us at AJStream. The show is all about us listening to what you are talking about.
Hi, I'm Andy Barrett. I'm a computer scientist, and I'm Wormholer693 on YouTube, and I'm in the stream.
You can't hide any longer, and everyone is accountable for their actions. It's a strong statement, and the sentiment behind an online campaign aimed at exposing Egyptian security officials who are suspected of engaging in torture and other human rights abuses. This is a website started by a journalist by the name of Hossam al-Hamlawi back in 2008. This well precedes the Egyptian Revolution, and it's titled Piggipedia. And we have on our site that it's Egypt's Human Flesh Search. This is a reference to something that we've been seeing in China, where people get together and they try to find out who was the perpetrator of a given criminal act. Well, what's happening in Piggipedia is they're basically using Flickr as a platform for identifying officials who have been accused of torture. Now we see, I'll just show you an example here. We've got the faces blocked out because unfortunately we cannot verify if this person is actually committed the acts they've been accused of. But as you can see, this is a photo that's been submitted by someone, and in it, someone has made the note that this man tortured two of my cousins by electric shocks after he arrested them in 2005. The idea being that they can use sunlight as a disinfectant to expose corruption within the system. We're lucky to have joining us now via Skype from Cairo, Hossam al-Hamlawi, who's an investigative journalist, a blogger, and the creator of Piggipedia. Hossam, welcome to the stream.
Hi.
So tell us, first of all, what inspired you to start this website?
Fellow bloggers had been profiling police officers who were involved in cracking down on protests or involved in torture cases since 2004, 2005, 2006. So the idea just came to my mind that why don't we put all of those pictures and profile photos together somewhere public, where number one, this is a deterrence against the officers, that we tell them we are monitoring you as you are monitoring us, Number two is that we were hoping this would give a chance to torture victims to also come forward and start building a database about the abuses each of those officers were involved in. So I started the Piggipedia in 2008, and I was hoping actually that Flickr would be the ideal platform for it. But right now, I won't lie to you, we are in a crisis. And thanks to Flickr mainly, who went on and censored our photos and took the profile pictures of many of those state security officers down.
Now, Hossam, let me interrupt there to provide some context for our audience. From what we understand, you and a number of other people were involved in I guess, kind of a raid on state security headquarters near Nasr City, and you actually took data files that had images and names and basically some biographical information on some of these state security officials, and that is what Flickr has asked you to take down. Am I correct?
Indeed. In March, me and hundreds of other activists, after besieging the state security police headquarters in my neighborhood, Nasr City, which is the biggest, as we call, torture factory in Egypt, we did find a couple of DVDs that had profile pictures of state security officers. I did upload them to Flickr, only to have them taken down in 2 days, citing copyrights infringement. And I don't know whose copyrights are they talking about.
So in a nutshell, they're saying you are not the owner of those images, so they're saying copyright infringement. Now, I know some people have been calling this copyright as a potential form of censorship. However, one of the questions that came to my mind when I was looking at your site is, how do you verify, because anyone can submit to the Piggipedia site, how do you verify that these are actual state security people who have committed these acts? And isn't there a risk of potentially damaging the reputation of someone who might be innocent if there's not adequate verification?
Contrary to what many people think, the state security police, which is in theory secret police, wasn't really that secret after all, because we used to see their faces in protests. Many of the leaders of this state security apparatus were very familiar to us as activists, and we can double check and triple check their own photos. Many of us were subject to interrogation and were summoned to their offices on so many cases. We used to get phone calls from them. So more or less, each member of a group or an organization here knows the state security officers who were in charge of his group. So if you bring someone from the Ikhwan and ask him, who's the state security officer in charge of your group in that area, they would know.
Wow. So, Ahmed, they're saying that state security in Egypt is not that secret.
Yeah. Well, Hussam, I just want to quickly show some of these images from Wizarah al-Dakhiliya, which is, Mabahith Amn al-Dawla, or as it's become known. These are the images that we actually see on Flickr. I'm not sure if you can see them. This is the day that it was stormed, and I understand that you've said in the past that you cried once you saw some of the cells where you were imprisoned yourself. Is that true?
I wasn't imprisoned in that compound. I was imprisoned in a neighboring compound, which we also stormed on that day. And I was detained there in 2002. But the most grotesque torture experience I went through was actually in a third place, which is the central headquarters in downtown in Lazogli Square in Cairo. But many of us, including myself, were extremely touched when we reached those cells, because overall it's such a harrowing experience to think that your friends and your relatives had passed by this detention facility at any point.
Now, so Dean, this seems like they're really taking a strong stance in a way to try to defend themselves against these violations.
Well, Hussam, first of all, I'd just say you're an amazingly courageous person. You tortured yourself and then made a website to show the images of torturers, knowing that perhaps in turn it could result in more torture for you. My question is, has any of these people now in the new government of Egypt been brought to justice? And if not, is there any hint at all that there's going to be some trial or tribunal that's going to look into these allegations to ensure that these people are not part of the new Egypt, the new Egyptian government?
I am very disheartened to say that many of those state security officers still keep their posts, and many have actually been promoted even under the so-called revolutionary cabinet that we have in Egypt. The only person among those who is standing trial at the moment is Hassan Abdulrahman, General Hassan, who was the last director of State Security Police, and who was also a close ally and a coordinator with the American FBI.
I'm sorry, Hossam. I just wanted to jump in real quick just to ask you, you started this back in 2008, and what you're doing is, it's walking a dangerous line, because obviously if these people who are alleged to have committed these acts are seeing what you're doing, if they've committed violent acts in the past, why not in the future? You've also been a victim of torture and have worked with other people who have been. Were you not afraid when you started this in 2008? I mean, this is way before the revolution we see now. Why were you willing to do this then?
Well, I mean, I can't just describe myself as a brave person, because this wasn't only my effort. Many of the other Egyptian activists have taken similar risks, if not more, and I believe that there is a higher purpose for this. We need to rid our country of those torturers, and I thought that somebody should take an initiative to do that. And I was just helping in a wider effort.
Hossam, I'm going to ask you to stay with us for a minute. We've got a couple more things we want to discuss on Egypt, and I want to get some feedback from the online community, so hold tight for just a second. Ahmed, what have people been saying about online?
Speaking of people talking online, I just want to quickly start with one thing that I believe you said, Arabawi, in a conversation, because we've been monitoring this. But in the meantime, let's just quickly pull up some of the conversations. One person is saying, as we posted on Facebook, that Egypt was just a coup made possible by the social uprising. I doubt that the demands that formed the core of the revolution will be addressed. The leadership of the popular uprising is lacking. Now, that's a really interesting question, because the Muslim Brotherhood didn't particularly partake in the revolution in Tahrir, and yet now they are emerging as, the leaders in terms of the parliament. So why is the popular uprising lacking leadership? That's an interesting question.
Okay. I mean, I would say to that point, this is something that we really have to consider, because it seemed like a very grassroots thing.
Right.
But ultimately, any power vacuum is going to be filled some way, somehow. Mm-hmm. Elections are coming up this fall, and we're going to see if this revolution has been successful or not.
Right.
And the Muslim Brotherhood is also the most organized group. It was the only opposition party for years and years.
Right.
So they were able to fill that vacuum the quickest. And now other groups are scurrying to get there. Other popular groups of young people who are really involved in Tahrir Square have now to form parties, build an infrastructure, and have an impact with their message out there. It's going to be a lot of work for them.
Right. And remember, you too can join the stream.
Hi, mein Name ist Karin Lornsen. Ich arbeite für die United Nations Foundation hier in Washington, D.C. und ich bin Teil des Streams.
So we definitely want you to keep submitting stories and information. Tweet us at AJStream. Egypt has obviously gone through some dynamic changes since former President Hosni Mubarak was forced to resign in February. Voters have overwhelmingly passed constitutional reforms in March and are now preparing for the first elections since the revolution.
Right.
The interesting thing in this instance is, just as we saw Facebook being used as a tool in the revolutionary phase, we're now seeing these online platforms becoming robust tools for this democratic progress forward. I mean, it seems like Egypt has now got 7 million Facebook users. And this is in a country where you do not necessarily have a majority of the population even having access to Facebook. So that's a significant number of people. One of the things that was really intriguing is looking at the way in which some of these actual Egyptian political leaders have been using Facebook. Here we see a site by Mohammed al-Baradei, who is obviously a former head of the IAEA. We see he's a very well-known political figure in Egypt. He's got 384,000 people on his Facebook page. We've also seen Amr Moussa, who is the head of the Arab League, former Egypt's foreign minister. He's also got a Facebook page and is apparently leading in polls at this point in time. Joining us now via Skype to discuss this is Sharif Salah al-Din, a member of Egypt's Muslim Brotherhood. Sharif is joining us also from Cairo. Welcome to the stream.
Thank you very much.
So we've got Hossam and Sharif. I want to just talk to you both. And Sharif, I'm going to go to you first with this. We understand that the Muslim Brotherhood is contesting for about 50% of seats in Parliament. Why are you not running a presidential candidate?
Well, for many reasons, our brothers have been discussing this issue thoroughly, and they found out that the best way for the community to really give a peace message, a message of working and doing out, not just talking, that we're not seeking for authority, but rather we're seeking for the wealth and goodness of our community. So
now, to that point, I'm sorry, if I could just jump in. We understand that there are some divisions within the Brotherhood, that there has been a group of young people who are members who feel that there should be at least some quotas. If the Brotherhood is going to be involved in democratic politics, that there should be some quotas for a minimum number of women members, of youth members, of Coptic, of non-Islamic members. What are your feelings about those proposals?
Yes, they are just to a certain limit, and this is regarding the party, not the Muslim Brotherhood clan.
So you're talking about the Freedom and Justice Party, which the Muslim Brotherhood is running candidates under. Am I correct?
Yes, yes. I'm a member of the Muslim Brotherhood Party.
Okay. Now I want to come to you, Ahmed. Like, this is really interesting, the stuff that we're seeing. Obviously, a lot of online activity about this, but I mean, what are you seeing with regard to people's feelings pro or anti this idea of a valuable, progress since the revolution?
Yeah, one interesting question where the Muslim Brotherhood is kind of departing from what a lot of the people who were part of the uprising are demanding is, this drafting of the constitution, essentially, where they're going to declare that, Egypt would be a civil state. So I'd be interested in your perspective as to why the Brotherhood is rejecting, drafting a new Egyptian constitution before the parliamentary elections.
And this is for you, Sharif.
Sharif.
Yes?
Is there a reason that you are against the drafting of a new constitution prior to the parliamentary elections? The Muslim Brotherhood, I mean.
How come that you can gather the Egyptian people with their vast majority having their own ideas and points of view without having a parliament that really and justly represents all the directions and disciplines in Egypt? How come that we can get to a close agreement through all people without having a real parliament? This is the main issue in such case.
Okay, I want to go to Hossam. Hossam, do you feel that you can have a just parliament without having a reformation of the constitution?
We can have neither, I'm afraid, because the current rulers of Egypt are Hosni Mubarak's military generals. They are the ones who served them loyally over the past 30 years, and they are trying to defuse the revolution as much as they can. So, of course, every revolution must go through its own transitional period, but it depends who's administering this transitional period, and I'm afraid in our case, it's the military junta. So the revolution is largely unfinished. So in all cases, I don't think really that any reformation of the constitution at the moment or any parliamentary election is going to be of results that the Egyptian people are going to admire and like in general.
Hossam, I'm going to just jump in here because we have two questions that are coming up around the sectarian violence that we're seeing. And I think we should ask you this because that's why we asked the question about declaring Egypt a civil state, as many people would like. One of the questions is from Rami Khater right here. His name is, if this Egyptian blogger wants to get the pictures out, oh, forgive me, that's a mistake. So it's from the City Girl 86. Is Egypt facing a counter-revolution, and what is the military doing about the recent clashes between Christians and Muslims? How can you guarantee to minimize those? Sharif?
Well, naturally, Egypt is facing a counter-revolution, of course. There are people here in this society whose privileges have been affected by the current events. I cannot say safely that there is a unified central command for this counter-revolution, but you can expect that all members of the former regime, including the military junta members themselves, are involved in attempts to either contain or crack down on the revolution. The current sectarian strife in Mbaba is a little bit more complicated. Now, some people are just happy to lay the blame on former members of state security police, which could be possible. But at the same time, the Salafi crisis is in a movement. Their own sheikhs did not support the revolution. And their base cadres took part in the revolt, defying their orders. So the only way to keep their base cadres at the moment under control is to mobilize and unleash this militancy in directions that they can make sure at the end of the day is not going to affect the structures of the system that those Salafi sheikhs are part of.
So basically, I want to get you in here, Dean. Hossam is saying that some of these, this sectarian strife that we're seeing in Egypt right now is because some people don't want to see change in the society. I mean, you were just in the Middle East a couple of months ago. What were you hearing from people on the ground?
Well, a lot of the younger people there, regardless where they lived, were in support of the revolution in Egypt, the idea of people having self-determination and input into their own government. You know, my question, though, to the Sharif is because I emailed several young friends on Facebook who are Egyptian, and they have concerns about the Muslim Brotherhood, that if they were to take power, that it could become like an Iran, a strict religious nation. And I know that there's reformers within the Muslim Brotherhood and more conservative elements as well. Yet there's no women allowed in the 2 executive boards of the Muslim Brotherhood, and the Muslim Brotherhood has said that a Coptic Christian, nor should a woman be president of Egypt. So these conflicting messages sent out. What could you say to the young people who might want to support the Muslim Brotherhood's political party, but have these concerns that it'll be a much more conservative country than they live in today?
That's for you, Sharif.
Yes, regarding the Muslim Brotherhood party, as everybody can see, it's open to all the Egyptian people from all disciplines in Egypt to join in, and they can get as fair and as just as anybody else in terms of ranking inside the party, as long as they accept the main idea and legislation.
Sharif, how many women? I'm sorry, Sharif. How many women are in leadership of the Muslim Brotherhood right now?
I don't have a clear count, of course, but I know for sure that there is a clear construction and establishment for women and women alone inside the Muslim Brotherhood, and they're getting the same level except for the higher reporters.
Sharif and Hossam, I'm going to ask the both of you to stay with us. We're going to continue this conversation online, so please hold for just a minute. This is fascinating. For those of you tuning in on the air, we're going to continue this conversation during our post show. You can join it at stream.aljazeera.com. We're going to be learning more about post-revolutionary Egypt. Tweet us at AJStream. We will see you online. All right, thank you so much for joining us here in the post show. This is our opportunity to get a little bit deeper into some of these issues. We're right now speaking with 2 guests that are joining us from Cairo about the Egyptian revolution and what's happening now in the wake of it. And I want to come back to you, Sharif. You were just talking about the Muslim Brotherhood. Some people have expressed some skepticism about the Brotherhood's openness to other people. You've just heard Hossam make a statement that was very strong, that he didn't believe you could have real movement forward without a new kind of leadership. It's the members of the old regime that are in leadership right now through the military, and there hasn't been a reformation of the constitution. What makes you believe that the elections coming this fall will be seen as legitimate by the Egyptian people?
Yeah, well, a lot of issues can guarantee to all of us as Egyptians and to the whole world that the next upcoming elections would be as crystal clear. First thing, the last voting that has been held for the modification of for our legislation, it has been the first clear voting since more than 50 years ago. More than 18 million Egyptian people have gone there, voted, stayed for the whole day in the queue for waiting for their turn. The army, together with the police, has made a clear view for everybody that there is no more forging for elections. So this is one issue. Secondly is that all the thugs who belong to the National Democratic, the ex-National Democratic Party has now vanished. They will never have the legitimacy to appear again on the Egyptian so either social or political view. So now the Egyptians are, for the first time in their lives since 50 years ago, will have a fair chance to choose the people who really appear in the parliament to speak out for their favor.
Now, Hossam, I want to jump in and ask you about this because we've been reading that Amr Moussa has been doing very well in the polls, at least in the presidential context, which will follow the September parliamentary elections in November. Amr Moussa is a member of NDP. He is a former foreign minister. If you have such a person who's connected to the old regime in certain ways, looking like such a leader, a potential frontrunner in these upcoming elections, does that signify that maybe the Egyptian people are not ready for the kind of change that was being discussed during the revolution? Hossam.
Sir, I really don't know which polls are you referring to that would show Amr Moussa to be popular, because on the ground, every single conference he appeared at, it was number one, protected by NDP members, former NDP members. Number two, whenever the youth was given a chance to contribute questions freely.
Hossam, I'm sorry. We're having a little bit of an echo. Do you have a headset that you were using previously?
No, actually, I'm not.
I'm sorry. I think it might be Sharif. Hold on one second, Hossam. Sharif, if you could kindly put your headset back on. I believe you had a headset. If you could put that back on, we won't get the echo of Hossam's sound.
Hossam, in the meantime, I just want to clarify that it was the Pew Research Center poll that I think Derek was citing, and it said that, again, that Moussa was in the lead, and then Hosni Noor was next, and then Mohammed al-Barad'i was in third.
It's interesting. These guys probably don't agree on much, but they were both nodding their head yes, that poll not being what the numbers say, but not being accurate on the ground. Because you can see Sharif's head saying yes and Hussam.
Yeah, and Hossam, please continue. We want to continue to hear what you were saying.
I was just saying that at every single conference that he held, number one, it was protected by NDP thugs. Number two, youth were not given the chance to ask questions directly. Number three, whenever they got the chance to ask directly, they were beaten up, by thugs in those conferences. Number four, Moussa had to cancel several events before because he knew that protests were waiting for him. We have no illusion whatsoever about Amr Moussa. He's a former loyal member of the Mubarak's regime. He presided over one of the most infamous posts in the Arab world, which is the Secretary General of the ineffectual Arab League, sitting every day, with 22 representatives of Arab dictators overseeing the massacres and the oppression that are happening to their people. Sir, we do not want him for sure. This could be like some comedy, a black comedy. Amr Moussa is the president.
Hossam, I'm just going to go quickly to Sharif because a lot of people are tweeting in asking us what you think about what's going on in Mbaba. And the reason we want to bring this up is also because there was a Facebook page that claimed that there's a Salafi coalition that actually brought on or incited Mbaba's violence. Right here we have this article in Al-Masr Al-Yawm, if you read it today. So the question that came in is basically asking from Ramsville, what are your thoughts, Sharif?
Well, to be just enough, there is no fact till now, but we are sure that the judicial issue will be covered clearly by the government, and whoever has started this issue will be clearly punished. But what we can say is that, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Please go ahead.
Okay. The issue is that what we can say that the whole media all over the world now are being biased towards the word, between quotations, Muslim mobs. This has been raised today in the Washington Post. So how come that we can say that we will wait for further investigation to make sure who really started this fire, and then start talking about Muslim mobs?
Are there any relationship, Sharif? Is there any relationship between the Muslim Brotherhood and this Salafist movement?
No, because we are in the basics. The word Salaf comes back to the roots of Islam.
It means
by
predecessor.
Default, yes, by default, all Muslim Brotherhoods are Salafs. That is, that we follow strictly the syllabus that our Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, has started 14 centuries ago. There is no deviation in that. The only difference is that, in my opinion, the Muslim Brotherhood has one step further towards politics and working with the government through 30 years, asking for modifications and asking for more freedoms, while our brothers in the Salaf movement just stayed in their own idea of making themselves better in terms of religion.
You know, I want to thank you both, Sharif and Hossam, for giving us this insight into what's happening on the ground. We really appreciate you both joining us here today. We're going to try to take on a different perspective, and we're going to try to get a female view on this. Yeah. Nihal is a member of Nihal Albana. She's a member of Egypt's Social Democratic Party. We've been trying to get her on Skype, so we're going to see if we can get her connection. It was dropping a little while. We would have had her during the main broadcast, but we'll see if we can get some of her insight there. But, you know, you see this, Dean, some very strong views. You saw some areas where they were agreeing that, for example, Amr Musa did not.
They agreed
that they don't want Amr Musa, at least these two. Well, but at the same time, you know, it's clear that the revolution did not yield any kind of singular vision for Egypt's future.
And I love to hear their competing vision of what, because one general, Hossam is on the left, and Muslim Brotherhood, you know, I guess centered to right perhaps. Their competing vision of what each of them would want to see Egypt to be.
You know, but we were talking a lot about domestics, because when it comes to foreign policy or in Egypt, the way that Amr Musa is trying to distance himself from the former, you know, from Mubarak and the NDP is by saying that he initially had disagreed with Mubarak's policy on Israel. Mm-hmm. And so he's kind of positioning himself this way because he recognizes, as the polls showed a couple weeks ago, that the majority of Egyptians are really looking to depart from that treaty in 1979 and also the gas deals with Israel.
Well, this is interesting because we heard that, so there's apparently a group of more, I guess, what we call progressive movements that have come together, including the Social Democratic Party. They had a meeting of their National Council this weekend on Saturday, and these are the group of people who feel like, you know, they are not happy basically with the referendum on the Constitution that happened in March. They want to see a completely new Constitution created prior to the parliamentary elections in the fall, and they have stated that they want to end all aid from the United States, or at least this is one of the things that has been discussed in those meetings. If that happens, I think that has profound implications for Egyptian foreign policy vis-a-vis the U.S. and Israel.
Right. Yeah.
But when you talk to the younger people that I do.
And before you make that point, I think we've got Skype, so let's bring in Nihal. Nihal Albana, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to the stream.
Hi, hello, thank you.
So if you could go ahead. Dean is going to make a point, but why don't you make it to Nihal? Let's draw her in.
Well, we were just having a discussion about whether issues about foreign policy with Egypt in the upcoming election for president are going to be as important as domestic questions. And when I speak to the young people, their questions to me their thoughts to me are more about domestic issues, not talking about Israel at all, or about aid from the United States, but for job creation, opportunity, ending corruption within the Egyptian government. Now, what do you see as the biggest issues that are going to be presented in this upcoming election?
I do not think that foreign policy issues, especially with regards to Israel or any other conflict in the Middle East, is going to be of any high priority during the coming 5 years at least. The main rhetoric, the mainstream rhetoric, which is being communicated on the streets, is that in order to do anything with regards to our foreign policy and making it right, and by right it's relative, we need to have a stronger Egypt, an Egypt with more social justice, an Egypt with no corruption, an Egypt with institutions by which decision making is clear cut and is strengthened. Foreign policy is foreign policy in Egypt has been nothing but hilarious in the past, 3 decades or something, because the institution by which foreign policy related decisions have been formulated and conducted and deconstructed and whatever has been very. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm just gonna. I'm sorry to cut you off, but since you're a woman and since we've been waiting to get your perspective, I want to talk to you about some questions that have been coming in from Nadia E on Twitter, asking about women's role in society at large, but specifically saying that women do belong to the Muslim Brotherhood unofficially, and there's indeed a form of ranking among them, but it's unofficial. What is your take on the Muslim Brotherhood as, potentially being able to sweep 50% of the parliament and their relationship with women?
First, you asked two separate questions. The first one, I'll answer the first one, which is with regards to the Muslim Brotherhood taking on 50% of the parliament. I am really amazed by how the rhetoric is very similar to the National Democratic Party, which just toppled. The only party which used, or the only political entity which used to advocate for itself as having the majority was the National Democratic Party. And it's very hilarious to have another party right after the revolution claiming that they do have a majority in the streets. Well, if they did have a majority of the streets and if they did have this kind of they do have this kind of majority now, then why didn't they do their own revolution 30 years ago?
See,
or 2 years ago?
That is a very, very powerful statement. Why didn't they do their own revolution? And we're going to have to really keep tabs to see how this revolution unfolds, because the story is not told. Nihal, I'm so sorry we've run out of time. We're sorry it took so long to get you on this time, but we hope that we'll be able to have you back again. Thanks so much for joining us. And for all of you who have been involved and who have had a chance to join us today, please stay tuned. We have an opportunity to continue these conversations next week and tomorrow. So we'll see you at AJ Stream on Twitter, and we'll see you online.